Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's such a special day to be on the show because we're here with the founder and CEO of Charity Water, Scott Harrison. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to start out real quick for those who don't know with an introduction to Charity Water and your journey starting the nonprofit.
Sure. Well, I'll try to do the short version of this, but I was a very degenerate, low-life club promoter for about 10 years, running around, getting drunk, smoking cigarettes, and, doing drugs. And I fortunately came to my senses at the age of 28 and realized that I'd become the worst person I knew. And if I continued down this path, there would just never be enough. There would never be enough money. There'd never be enough parties, never enough status. And I realized that I was just serving myself. And I'd been raised in a very conservative Christian family, so I'd rebelled against all that. My mom had been really sick growing up. And I kind of changed my life in 180 degrees. I rediscovered a very lost faith, a very lost morality. I wound up selling almost all my possessions at 28 and going to live in Africa, in Liberia, West Africa, actually, on a humanitarian mission. So the idea was to explore the opposite of my life, go serve others instead of myself, and see where that led. And the year humanitarian mission actually turned into almost 2. And I'd seen a lot of crazy things during my time in post-war Liberia, a country with no electricity, no running water, no sewage, no mail. But the thing I think that struck me the most was the fact that people were drinking dirty water. And I'd never seen children drink from swamps and scummy rivers before. And learned that more than 50% of the people in the country didn't have their most basic need met for health, for life. So water just became this thing for me. And I came back and I realized that it wasn't just Liberia, there were 1 billion people worldwide living without clean water. And this is something that I had sold in clubs for $10. Guys would come into clubs, buy 20 bottles of water, not even open them. And yet it faced so much of humanity. So at 30 years old, broke because I'd given all my money to Mercy Chips and the people I'd met along the way. I was living on a closet floor in Soho, New York at the time. But I decided to start Charity Water and make it my mission to try to see an end to the water crisis, to be a part of bringing a day on Earth where no kid, simply because they were born a couple thousand miles away, is dying of diarrhea because they had to drink from a swamp.
And now you guys are just about to hit your 10th birthday.
I know. It feels like so much longer. 10 years going on 80. I don't know.
What do you want the next 10 years to stand for, Scott?
That's a good question. I don't know that we have the definitive answer to that. In some ways, we're trying to finish this decade really well, and there's a lot of focus on that right now in our 10th year, helping 1 million people get clean water just in this year alone. I think we've had a lot of generous people step up over the last decade. Over 1 million people have given to Charity Water, have cared about this issue. The water crisis has come down from 1 billion people to 660 million, so we are making progress. So we're very optimistic that that this actually could happen. Gosh, I think we want to do more. We want to go faster. We're helping 2,700 people a day get clean water, but that's not enough. 1 million people a year. It would take us 663 years, right? If it was just us. And it's not just us. And there are a bunch of people that are involved and working towards this goal. But we want to do more personally. We want to get more people involved. We want to invite more people into this story. Because the donations and the support really does make a difference. We are able to turn that into clean water. We're able to change people's lives every single day. And we've now done that in over 20,000 villages across 24 countries.
Can you give us an example of your team and community's impact in one of those villages?
Sure. We shot a virtual reality piece last May. We were talking about that a little earlier, and there are 2 related stories that maybe speak to both the need and then the hope. So the first story is of a 13-year-old girl. So back up a little bit. I've been to Ethiopia 27 times since starting the organization. So it's a country where we have a deep commitment to. And I was up in the north maybe 4 trips ago. And I was staying in a crappy $5 a night hotel room. And the owner came up to me and recognized me and said, "Hey, Charity Water's doing great work. Let me tell you a story." So he starts telling me about this 13-year-old girl that lived in his village that used to walk 8 hours a day for dirty water with a clay pot on her back. And he said one day this woman, Leda Kiros, comes back into the village and she slips and she falls and she breaks her clay pot. So now all the water that she has spent all day collecting is now, out in the dust. And to make matters worse, she's broken this valuable asset of the family. So he says she doesn't go back for more water. She hangs herself from a tree in our village, and we find her body swinging. And, he let that sit for a while, and he said, "The work you're doing is important." And he walked back into the kitchen. I remember thinking that's not true. Tell the foreign donor a sad story to, encourage them about the development work that's happening. But it just nagged at me. And, was this true? Was a 13-year-old girl really hanging from a tree because she'd spilled her water? So I went and lived in this village for a week. I hiked 9 hours over the mountains to reach this village, and I learned about her story, and I walked in her footsteps. I saw where she got her water. I met her friends that are still walking for dirty water. And I saw and photographed the tree where they found her body, and it's this frail little tree next to a rock path on her way home. And that's just a little snapshot of maybe one name in 663 million people. See, we hear about these statistics and we shut down because it means nothing. And who could ever possibly imagine 663 million anything, let alone people without water? But there was one girl named Leda Kiros Hailu that took her life because of water. So I wanted to tell a more hopeful story in virtual reality. And nearby, we were going to be drilling a well, and there was another 13-year-old girl named Salam who was going to get clean water for the first time in her life. So that's what we documented in virtual reality. And Salam, it was a beautiful story. Her name means peace. Her mom had tragically died of mental illness, so she was taking care of her father and her younger brother and sister. And before the water point, she didn't have enough time to do everything. She had to go get the water. The water was dirty, so the water would make her sick. She tried to go to school, but she was only going to school a couple days a week. She was helping to take care of the family, and she was just exhausted all the time. So we shot this really beautiful film. It's 8 minutes long, and it follows the 6 days where her entire life changes through clean water, through something we take for granted. And you get to watch her drink clean water for the first time, and it's really moving. I went back to show her film in VR. I actually brought a VR headset out to her rural village and strapped it on her and said, "Hey, here's the film we made about you. And by the way, I'm going to show this to a lot of people, and it's going to help a lot of people get clean water." When I went back, she was telling me that she's healthier now and she's going to school 5 days a week.
That's great.
So that's what water does. It impacts health. It impacts local economies. There was a UN study that found every dollar invested in water and sanitation, water and toilets, makes communities 4 to 8 times richer. And it's a combination of all these things. It's improved health, money not spent taking kids to faraway clinics or paying for medicine. It's improved education as kids spend more time in school or more time studying because they're not walking hours every day. And then it's the ability to turn time into productive work for so many women. And we'll hear of small businesses being started, women selling rice at the market, selling peanuts. Earlier this year, I was in Zambia with a woman who was selling rugs for $4, and her rugs were everywhere. So it's a very powerful way to lift people out of extreme poverty. And, again, it's something we take for granted, but, imagine going a day with no clean water. And actually, if the only water you had was 5 gallons and you had to use that dirty water for everything, I mean, it's a toilet flush. We use like 30 times that amount every single day as Americans.
It's really shocking, and I love how you guys captured it in VR to show how Salam's life was changed. So you got to see each stage of the process. How was the installation, and how's it going now?
Yeah, well, we first showed it to just a few of our donors that had actually invested in Ethiopia but had not been. So he said, "Look, you've written checks to bring clean water to villages, take a look at what it's actually like. And amazing story. We had one donor who had done 20 villages, about $200,000.
Wow.
And he came in, we were really thanking him. So he just came in for a visit because he had just given, and he watched this film and he wrote another $400,000 check. He did another 40 villages. So moved by the impact. And, that's really, I think that speaks to the power of VR, the power of empathetic storytelling that is also true. Right now, we've taken over a huge public space in Lower Manhattan. It's called Brookfield Place, and it's right underneath the Freedom Tower. And we have about 1,000 volunteers that have been man stations over 21 days. And people are queuing up to put on the headset. And actually, every view of the VR film unlocks a $30 donation. We had a donor in the South put up $300,000 and say, if you can get 10,000 people to watch that film, I'll pay $30 for every view.
What do you see in the future, too, with VR? What are some projects that your team wants to explore?
I think I'd love to make it interactive. I'd love to put you in a situation where you could maybe make a decision. Do you go for water now? Do you cook? Do you clean? Do you go to school? Maybe you get people to make some of these choices and understand what some of the trade-offs are. I think it'd also be cool to allow people to donate seamlessly in the headset. Imagine watching a film and says, do you want to donate $10 right now? Or even to see the end of the film. Do you want to see someone get clean water? And you could just tap, and it would be a $10 donation. So I think, seamless pay experience could be very cool.
Empathy is such a huge part of everything that you guys do, and a lot of it comes alive in that storytelling. What have you learned about trust and empathy with your donors the last 10 years?
Well, Charity Water's business model was set up to restore a very lost trust. 42% of Americans don't trust charities. So very many people believe that charities are bad. Charities aren't, they're not transparent, they're not efficient, they don't do the right things with money. So our very business model was set up to try to repair a lost trust by so many people. The stat on that, 42% of Americans, 42% of people in this country do not trust charities. We have this unbelievable heritage of generosity and being good neighbors, or at least caring about our brothers and sisters thousands of miles away who might be living in poverty. But 42% of people don't trust the system. So, we created a unique business model. 100% of all donations to Charity Water go directly to the projects from day one. We even pay back credit card fees. So if you donate $100 or $1,000, every single penny goes directly to fund projects. We have also put every one of those water projects up on Google Earth and Google Maps. So we try to connect donors so they can actually see where their money's going, so they can see the impact that their dollars have made. So I think that has really worked with trust. We're always looking for new ways to show people where the money's going. As far as empathy, I think it's just we tell stories, and these are true stories. We don't need to exaggerate them. We spend so much time in the field with these communities that we hear these stories and we share them. And some of them are incredibly sad. I was with a woman in the Sahel desert of Niger in 120-degree heat who told me she lost 8 children. She buried 8 children. She gave me all their names,
God.
ages. Didn't know why they had all died, but I can't imagine losing one of my children. I mean, losing 8 children. I couldn't even believe that she was standing there talking to me. And then some of them are incredibly hopeful. There was a woman named Helen that had gotten clean water from a Charity Water point, and she told us for the first time in her life she was beautiful. She felt beautiful because she had enough water for her face and her body, and she never had enough before, and she'd been making all of these sacrifices and putting her family first, putting her husband and her kids first, and not using the water on herself, and finally having enough to actually wash her clothes and wash her face. So I think stories bring out empathy in people, and statistics do not.
One story that really stands out to that your team has shared and I know is really meaningful to you is about Rachel Beckwith. Can you tell us about her story?
Sure. So one of the things Charity Water's done is we ask people to donate their birthdays. And what I mean by that is instead of accepting gifts, instead of throwing themselves a big party, we say, look, you probably have enough stuff. You probably don't need any more stuff. And there are, by the way, 660 million people that don't even have clean water. So what if we could turn the birthday into a giving moment? So we built a platform where people can donate their birthday to Charity Water, ask for their age in dollars. So a 7-year-old asks for $7 and a 31-year-old asks for $31. And 100% of that money goes directly to projects, and everybody can see where the money goes. So I'd been, the backstory here, there was a church in Seattle that had a young pastor, and he wanted to kind of show the town that they weren't too religious. So he threw a party, he hired a local band, he got a bunch of kegs, and he invited the town of Seattle to come out for a fundraiser. Well, he raised about $500,000.
Wow.
Charity Water. So I flew out to Seattle to thank the church and tell them where the money was going. And at the end of my talk, I invited everyone to donate their birthday. Rachel was in the audience. She was 8. So she decided to give up her 9th birthday. Now, we as mature adults, right, this makes sense to us. But for a kid, like, toys are important. So she gets it. She wants people across the world that she's never met to get access to clean water, doesn't have any gifts, doesn't throw a party. She winds up raising $220, which was a little short of her $300 goal. Right after her birthday, there's a terrible 20-car pileup, and she's killed. She's killed in a car crash. A tractor trailer runs into the back of her car that her mom was driving, and she didn't make it. I was in Central African Republic at the time when this happened. I had landed in New York. My phone turns on, and I get a text from the pastor saying, look, Rachel was just killed, but we want to reopen her campaign and honor her last wish, effectively, which was for kids she'd never met to get clean water. So this story starts to spread throughout their church community, throughout the Seattle community, starts to spread through the country, and people start donating $9 in her honor. She goes from $220 to $1.2 million. Over 37,000 strangers, complete strangers, hear about Rachel's heart for others, and they decide to give. She touches over 30,000 lives with clean water. So the story kind of ended on the 1-year anniversary of her death. I invited the mom and the grandparents to come with me to Ethiopia and go village to village to village and meet the actual people, meet the children that Rachel had given clean water to. And it was an incredibly moving experience. We made a video that is still hard to watch without tears, and they're really happy tears because her legacy is so profound. The pureness, the vision of a 8-9-year-old girl to care for others more than about stuff, which is so countercultural. It impacted the lives of over 30,000 people in Ethiopia. So it's an amazing story. It's interesting. Her 5-year anniversary was just a couple weeks ago, and her mom and grandparents flew in to spend that time with Charity Water. And we wound up having dinner at our house that night. And her legacy continues to grow because she inspired so many other people to donate their birthdays. So people that had given to Rachel's campaign then went on to donate their birthdays, raising over $1 million of new money. So her legacy is actually more profound even than her direct impact.
It's really incredible. I was so blown away, and it's something that you want to share with everyone.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story.
On your first trip on the Mercy Ship, when you were writing about it, you shared that the individuals you met taught you the meaning of courage. When you reflect on the last decade, Scott, what or who comes to mind when you think of courage?
Definitely Gary Parker. He is probably the closest thing I've had to a mentor, and even though we spent a very short time together, his example inspired me so much. He was a surgeon from California that decided to volunteer for a couple months and operate for free on people with no access to medical care on the Mercy Ship, and that was 29 years ago. So he just never left. He just stayed on this ship. He was so moved by the ability that his hands, his skill, his craft could be used in the service of others who couldn't afford to pay. So that was just amazing. And so many of the patients that would turn up at the ship had hung on with no hope, many of them living as outcasts. with huge tumors growing, with leprosy, burned badly beyond recognition in some places. And they had just continued the fight, even though they would probably never get well. And then one day, some doctors turn up and say, "We're here to help, and we've brought an amazing hospital ship." So that was a really formative experience for me. Now I'd say I'm really inspired by our local partners. Charity Water supports about 1,600 locals around the world. There's 500 people in Ethiopia alone that get up every single day, and they just work really hard to deliver clean water to their own people. And we believe for work to be sustainable, it has to be led by the locals. For it to be culturally relevant, it has to be led by the locals. So you don't find Westerners, running around in Africa or India or Asia. We go and find those local partners and we build their capacity. We help them get more drilling rigs. We help them get more trucks. We help them hire hydrologists. So, for example, this certainly wouldn't be allowed here in America, but our drillers in Ethiopia are working 29 out of 30 days a month during the 8-month dry season. They want to capitalize on every possible drilling day. They then see their families for the 4 months when it rains and the roads just become washed out. But that's an incredible amount of dedication, and they're these are long hours as well.
I'd love to shift gears for a couple of minutes and talk about your team, because we always talk about the huge impact that Charity Water is making, and that, of course, is undeniable. But I'd love to learn about the individuals who are powering the charge at your office with you and what your culture is like.
So we have about 75 people here in Tribeca. It's a pretty amazing office. We're in about 22,000 square feet. We have a very generous landlord that came with me to Ethiopia and caught the vision and has been taking very good care of us for about 6 or 7 years now. We have about 20 people of the organization are focused on making sure the money we are spending is spent in the most effective way and making sure that these projects are sustainable. They're also making sure that so being spent in the right way, that's kind of an audit function. And then that we're funding work of high quality, that's kind of the programmatic quality function. So imagine 20 people, give or take, effectively out there with clipboards, just running around country to country, turning up and making sure that we are funding the smartest, most effective projects that we're really changing people's lives. There's a key relationship team. So because Charity Water gives away 100% of the money, there are 115 families that pay for all the overhead. And we call that giving program The Well. And it's an amazing group of people from all over the world. So we have a key relationships team that works with them and our major donors. We have people in creative and marketing, so all that is done in-house. Those are small teams, but they're making the videos, telling the stories, sending emails, working on social media, really putting up content across the channels. And then we have a bunch of support functions. We have people in accounting who turn up every single day and fulfill amazing roles in IT and operations. Keeping this place going. We have events, so it's an amazing group of people. People and engineers. Our engineers, many of them have taken pay cuts and left big tech companies to come and use their coding skills for good. And they're working both on the program side, monitoring sensor data to make sure that wells are flowing, as well as the products that people would see online or on mobile.
For you, what makes your team so special?
I think passion. Nobody's here for the money. There are no stock options at Charity Water. There's no way to get rich and become a millionaire. We've really all transferred our equity to the poorest people in the world. So it's a real great sense of purpose. People here could be making so much more money, and they're not driven by that. They're driven by purpose. They're driven by using their gifts in the service of others, and it's a very special place to work.
What was the best part of this summer's hackathon?
We love the kids tour. We started doing tours now for children. I think there are 7 different stations. So kids will come in and get a passport that was designed, and the passport's empty. And they have to go to these different stations, learn about different parts of the water crisis, watch virtual reality, pump the well, and then they fill up their passport with stamps. And then at the end of it, they've unlocked a $30 donation. So that was really conceived of and built, and I see it running almost every day now.
Do the kids love it?
They love it. It's called The Adventure.
I love that. I can't wait to see more of the social media posts on that. Your team, by the way, does a fantastic job with social
Oh,
media and
thank you.
community. When you're not there, you get to feel like you are. That makes a huge difference.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks.
I'd love to touch on just two more questions before we go. I know there's probably no way for you to describe it in words, but can you tell us about your last trip and a really meaningful memory?
My last trip was to Zambia and Zimbabwe in South Africa a couple months ago. Um, I'm going to go with a little different one. So we were actually supposed to go to Mozambique, but I had a bunch of kids with me, and there was some rebel activity in Mozambique, so we pulled the trip because of the safety of the kids, and we moved to Zambia. So we saw a lot of the same projects, water projects being built, communities without water. We saw the need. That's all great. I actually saw Victoria Falls for the first time, so I'm going to go with the beauty of Africa because I think sometimes it's easy to talk about the extreme poverty and the need, but it is one of the most stunning, beautiful places I have ever been in the world. The falls were full, and we took our donors and their children, and we were drenched. I mean, you wear full parkas and you are just wet to the bone. It's just you're just in mist for 4 hours, and it was a really really special experience. It borders Zambia and Zimbabwe, and just a stunning natural place.
The video you shared was wild, so I can't imagine what it's like being
Yeah,
there
there's
in
a lot of
person.
volume, a lot of water.
Last one for you, Scott. Back in July, you shared a really great quote from Marion Wright Edelman where you said, "Service is the rent we pay for being. It's the very purpose of life and not something that we just do in our spare time." What does that mean to you, and how does it inform your life and work at Charity Water?
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you contrast my previous decade, I lived with well, service to myself. To live the most selfish existence that I think a person could live. And in some ways, I felt completely trapped by that because it's an insatiable, desire for more. And the minute I was able to switch that and start serving others with my gifts in Liberia, I there was a freedom that I found. It was amazing. I mean, there was a lightness, there was a happiness, there was a hope, there was a sense of purpose. So I think I just got the bug that if you try to serve, and I think this could work in marriage, this could work in parenting. If you try to serve yourself and put your needs above others, it's very limiting. So I think what I love about that quote is just a lifetime spent in service is a really fulfilling lifetime. And people often ask me, if you solve the water crisis and Charity Water at some point, along with many other great orgs, there's that day at the UN when you all drop the mic and say we did it. Do you shut down? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to go shut down and go work at Goldman Sachs and be a banker. I would probably try and find some other suffering in the world and say, you know what, people shouldn't be going to bed hungry, it's crazy that people don't have a roof over their head, and go work on shelter. So I think my favorite quote really is these days is, "Do not be afraid of work that has no end." And I really like that. A friend took a picture 8 years ago, walking by a store window, and sent me that photo. I love that, and that I think is a life of service. That's service to the poor. It's in some ways work that will never end, and that's okay.
Well, very powerful way to end. I'm so grateful that we got to have you on today, Scott. Such an honor to hear about your story and for the opportunity to share it. Before we go, can you tell everyone who's listening in what the best way is for them to get involved? Because you
Sure.
guys have created so many amazing ways to play a role at Charity Water.
Sure. Well, we're actually launching something right now, and it's a new way to give monthly. One of the biggest challenges for the org, being 10 now, we've had about 1 million one-time donors, people who've been very generous. But we start over. January 1 every year, the ticker goes back to zero, and we have to go and inspire people all over again, and continue to grow to help more people. So we're launching a subscription program in the same way that You might subscribe to Spotify or Netflix or your cable channel. It's a subscription program where people can subscribe to get people clean water every month. And it's kind of anchored around $30. So every $30 can give one person clean water. So that's $1 a day. Maybe 6 lattes, 7 lattes a month. But we have people that are giving $5 a month, and we have people that are giving $100 a month. So it's really more for us about that steady, it's more about a commitment. I think sometimes it's very easy for people to just do a lot of things once. And we're trying to build a community of people who really want to see an end to the water crisis. They're really bothered that today, in a world of Pokemon Go, human beings are dying of disgusting, nasty water simply because of where they're born. And we know how to do something about it, but we're not. We're not doing enough. So it's really building this community of idealistic people who are saying, hey, I can give $30 a month or I can give $10 a month. And knowing that 100% of it is going to go directly to projects. And then Charity Water is really trying to innovate and showing people where their money's going, showing them the impact every single month and inspiring people, saying, look, your sacrificial giving really is making a difference. And the vision of the program is, if you lose your credit card right now and you try to log into Netflix, well, it's not going to let you play anything. So you're going to enter your credit card back into Netflix. And we want to create such value and connection for people that they would lose their credit card and Charity Water would be the first place they would update that. Because it's really meaningful for them to give what they can. And, some people could give 30 a month, some people could give 5. And some people can give a lot more and do. So that's really a key priority for me, for the whole organization. And people could just go to the homepage and find out how to do that.
Well, I can't wait to see that evolve. Meaningful is certainly the best way to describe your work. Thank you so much and happy 10-year.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.